Hey, good morning.
All righty.
All right, and thank you, Anita. Good morning, everyone. It is April 6th. Welcome to this month's West Rad meeting for the month of April. We have a couple new members this morning, but before we get to that, I can't believe it's April already, but it is sunny outside, which I absolutely love. And I think it's supposed to be pretty warm tomorrow, which makes me even happier. So with that, Anita, would you mind doing a quick roll call, please?
Jeff Miller.
Here.
Mark May. Not yet. Okay. Ashley Murray. Here. Jeremy McKay.
Here.
John Hannum.
Present.
Jason Statz.
Here.
Samantha Ross. Absent. Mark Smith.
Here.
Thomas Crozier. There's Crozier.
Here.
How do you pronounce
Yes.
that?
Yes, here.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, like I said, we have two new members, which is great. It's always good to have a full roster. I think there's still two open spots.
Still,
It'll be great to get two more people on here at some point. But at this point, why don't we do some quick self-introductions? Does everyone have the agenda in front of them? If so, why don't we just go in reverse order, which would put Jason first, if you wouldn't mind, Jason.
So 5B.
No, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
no,
Just
the members.
Just a quick self-introduction, reverse order of the board members.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, Jason Statz here. I live in Ward 1 and I operate a business. Ward 1 downtown, I operate a business in Ward 1 West Salem on Edgewater and McNary called Across the Street Vintage and Resale. I'm the current vice chair for the West Salem Neighborhood Association. I also participate with Edgewater Partners, which is kind of a community networking or community neighborhood. Oh, I forget the acronym, but anyhow, they're kind of a beautification group and a kind of a sub-neighborhood association produced by the Salem Leadership Foundation, and they break up their territories by high schools. So West Salem High School is kind of the aggregator for that particular group. Also own another business in West Salem called Where to Eat Guide. Got my hands in the pot in a few places and just love to participate. Let me know how I can help.
Thank you, Jason. Mark?
My name is Mark Smith. I am a food scientist, product developer for Baxter's North America, formerly Truett Brothers, located in the urban renewal area of West Salem. Also a resident of West Salem, live in Woodhaven Estates. Happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you, Mark. Samantha's not here. Ashley?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I work at Salem Electric over here in West Salem, and I'm the lead over the member services department for customer service.
Thank you, Ashley. Jeremy?
Hey, good morning, guys. My name is Jeremy McKay. I'm a West Salem resident and the owner of West Salem Ace Hardware.
And I will add, his hair is different than last time, and the mustache is looking stellar. So I don't know that you pointed that out, but I'm going to do it for you because I believe in it.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeremy. You want to add something?
No, anytime we talk about my mustache and my beard, it's always a good day for me. So I could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
Bring it up.
All right. Thank you. John?
Good morning. My name is John Hannum. I work for Goodwill. The West Salem store is one of the stores in my portfolio, the store off Edgewater. And I've been coming to these meetings for quite some time. I feel like a veteran member at this point.
Without question, John. And it always proves that someone is a veteran when they say they're going to leave a little early from the meeting. I always respect that myself. So good. Tom, do you prefer Thomas or Tom?
Tom is better.
Tom?
Yep, Tom.
Okay, please.
Yeah, so my name is Tom Crozier. I'm a West Salem resident. I recently retired from a career in retail management. So right now I'm just looking to get involved in the community and be as active as possible.
Good, welcome. Retirement, you look too young to retire, so good for you, whatever that looks like. Mark May, Mark May just jumped in. It is 7:37. Thank you, Mark, for joining us this morning. We're just doing some self-introductions. We have a couple new members, and in perfect timing, you would be next.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so Mark May, I originally moved into West Salem as a child in like 77. Been here most of my life. Currently running a business that has some property in West Salem. Although our main activity, Rain Suite, is over by the fairgrounds. Been on the board here for a handful of years along with Jeff. Deeply interested in what's going on in West Salem, and happy to be a part of this.
Thanks, Mark. And one of the smartest dudes I've ever met. So Mark, you're being very modest there. Actually, a lot of people everyone on this thing is smart compared to me, I feel. So real quickly, Jeff Miller, board chair, been on this redevelopment advisory board for a number of years, similarly to Mark and John. We tend to be the veterans, it would seem, at this point. I think I've got one more year. I think next June, not this coming June, the following June, I'm out of here. Tori finally said, we can't stand it, you got to get out. I live in West Salem, Ward 8, and I do commercial real estate for a living, Coldwell Banker commercial, and involved up at West Salem High School with the football program, which is a huge passion. I love those stupid kids. I don't know why, but I do. And then also really involved in the chamber, Salem Chamber of Commerce. So that is it. Thank you, everyone, for your self-introductions. And again, Tom, Mark, thank you for joining the group. So moving on to the agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda? And if so, if there's any additions or deletions or a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ashley. With that, let's take a quick vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Thank you. The minutes, has anyone had an opportunity to read through last month's minutes? And if so, entertain a motion to approve.
I would do a motion to approve.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion, which there never really is, but I feel like I need to ask. So since there isn't, all in favor, either raise a hand or please say aye to approve the minutes. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Perfect. Thank you. We didn't have any action items from the last month. So moving down the agenda to number 5, there is a bond that the city of Salem is going out for, and Courtney is excited to be here, I can tell, to talk about the bond and what's involved in that bond. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to either Courtney or Tori and or both to kind of educate us a little bit on what that bond looks like.
Well, I'll just jump in really quick. Veteran members, Tori Banford with the City of Salem Urban Development Department, but Courtney's the more veteran member. She used to do my job before, now she's at the city manager's office. So always happy to see and welcome Courtney to the meeting.
Thank you, Tori, and thank you everyone for having me today. I want to just say how nostalgic this whole conversation has made me for West Salem too. I was a resident of West Salem for 15 years and moved over just, I think, year and a half ago. And my saddest moment was breaking up with Salem Electric. I just miss so much everything West. And so thank you all for sharing. I know many of your work. I know much of your work by experience. So thank you all for being such a great part of our community. So as Tori mentioned, I work in the city manager's office, and I have the privilege of working on the city's legislative policy work and the strategic plan, which sort of sets the direction for how we should be moving forward, and also some communications fun things. And one of the things that we're talking about right now is this bond idea. And Jeff has heard us speak about it before when we were kicking this off in January. And what I'd like to just do is tell you, first of all, to manage expectations, this is a work in progress. So I can tell you where we are, but not exactly what we're doing just yet. And so I have a couple of slides that I use to kind of help explain the premise, and that won't change. But the pieces inside the bond package are still kind of fluid. So if I could, I'll try to share my screen. I'm working on one screen, so that's a little bit more challenging, but might be easy. Let's just try. So here's what I want to talk to you guys about is this community improvement bond. And what you'll notice right off the bat that makes this different than most things is that it's a mix of things. Traditionally and historically, the city has been really successful with all of your help in putting together bond initiatives for a single purpose. So for example, 2006, we were able to replace all of the fire engines and make and help us respond more quickly with your help with a fire bond. In 2008, we had a really awesome experience in a streets and bridges bond, which funded almost 100 million of things. And it was such a great time too for us to be working together in that we had all kinds of cost savings, and we were able to roll about 88% of those projects into the local community to help sustain us through the recession. This one is really different because it's very broad in its scope. So what you should know, these are the things that are not going to change. What you should know is that it's a general obligation bond. That just means we ask the voters, and we're aiming for November of 22. We ask the voters to give us some future property taxes to help pay for bonds. We're looking at about 300 million. And why we're looking at that number is because we can bond for up to 300 million for the next 10 years and not change tax rates. It's just this really amazing and unique time where some of the previous investments that we've been working on together in our community are rolling off, and that capacity or that delta, that extra, we can funnel that back into more community improvements for the next 10 years. So those are the key points. We're looking at up to 300 million. If we go over that amount, we would have to raise tax rates. So our aim, our promise, our commitment is to stay at 300 million. And again, it's 10 years of investment. So this is kind of what it looks like. And please don't get attached. But here's what we're looking at. We know we have an urgent need for fire engines and equipment. So that would be our first investment. If it's successful in November of 22, we would take 26 million initially to replace the fire equipment. That means all the engines and some airport specialty equipment and some grassland fire equipment, all kinds of things. There are two pieces in this that are really flexible. So this idea of park upgrades and this idea of streets and sidewalks. I want to talk about those for just a minute. Those things are never going to be, even with 300 million of investment in streets and sidewalks, we couldn't make everything better. So those things can flex or scale to the community need or expectations and council guidance. Right now, this portion of the bond is about 47 million over what we need to be at. And so we're in the middle of kind of that sausage making where council committee is working with, we got, I think like 230 individual comments, and we've had public testimony throughout this process since January, getting all kinds of great project ideas. And the council right now is wrestling with what to put in the bond specifically, because again, it's a contract with voters. So if we say we're going to be doing these improvements, we have to do them. So it's that conversation and back and forth right now about what gets in and what doesn't get in, which is really challenging, as you can imagine. But we're thinking it's about half, or 150 million for streets and sidewalks. Park upgrades is about, I think, 35, it might be 45. That'll change. You can see that there's a piece for Civic Center earthquake safety. This is getting more refined as our conversations have been going on. Right now, they're aiming at $39.4 million. You can hear the precision for Civic Center earthquake safety. It doesn't mean that we'd be able to get right back in and operate after an earthquake, but it means that anyone who's in the building could get out safely. And there's some other improvements I can speak to if you're curious. You can see that there's a segment for sites for future fire stations. We know that as our community continues to grow, we need to put a fire station in northeast, and we need to put a fire station south to help our response. That piece of the bond is still sort of in flux. We'll see if it stays in the bond as we continue our conversations. You'll see a segment there for technology and cybersecurity. That part's also gotten a lot more specific. That represents $17.6 million. And that's for to replace the financial reporting, accounting systems, timekeeping, performance, and project management systems inside the city. That technology is way out of date. We've been neglecting those investments. So it's a pretty significant infrastructure investment. There's also a second data center in there for recovery after a disaster, and some redundant fiber, again, for resiliency purposes. So that's what that investment represents. There's a little portion there for affordable housing and shelter. That's also completely morphed as part of our conversation. Right now, we've gotten some pretty significant feedback that's driving the council consideration to include some acquisition for property that would be used to house 2 branch libraries with some affordable housing. So these would be mixed use projects that would have affordable housing and a branch library. And so that's, again, just for acquisition. It doesn't imagine construction, but it does imagine acquisition. There's a $10 million portion that we're calling Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. And that's really to leverage this bond resource to help fill the gap on some affordable housing projects. And we find ourselves doing that frequently just because of the market dynamics. And this gives us a little bit of an opportunity to boost those projects and ensure that they come into our community and help us with the housing situation. So that's what we know. You can tell it's different than what we thought when we started, and it's continuing to evolve. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want to hear from you about your thoughts and opinions. It's hard to react because it is so amorphous still. Our hope or expectation in terms of timing is to, I think there's on April 15th, there is another meeting of the council subcommittee that's wrestling with all of this. We hope that we can start moving this conversation into a council dialogue and know what the bond is going to be so we can start polling and seeing how it's working. On the polling topic, just before I open it up, I do want you guys to know that this idea of a bond that spans 10 years of investment with no change in tax rate for about 300 million polls really well after people have a sense of what we can do together. So it's about 62%. It polls favorably after we've had a chance to talk about it. So hopefully we can get really clear on what's in the bond, start talking about it, and then poll to see how it's doing. So it's really kind of a far-reaching conversation. I look forward to any and all questions. I'm happy to tell you what I know and where I don't know anything. Any questions from anybody?
Courtney, I'll jump in real quick. First off, I think it is a real pleasure to have you on and share with us the graph that you did. Are you planning to have numbers assigned, understanding that it's still a fluid document? At some point, you're going to attach numbers to that. Is that correct? So people can actually see what that is?
Yes, we have to do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, for the ballot, because like I mentioned, it is a contract with voters. And so the specificity in the ballot is really important because that's what we're committing to doing together should we be successful. The other thing I want to notice about the numbers, I mentioned earlier that some of our bonds are falling off of the tax rolls. And so when I said 300 million over 10 years, again, if we're trying to keep the tax rates constant, which is our aim, we can't bond for 300 million at the outset. We have to be very careful and strategic about when we bond for what. Our finance group is really good at this. They've been able to refinance and save money on other bonds, but they are currently thinking about 3 different issuances. So there could be an issuance at the outset, which would again go predominantly to fund the fire equipment and apparatus, because there's a little bit of a lead time and supply chain and blah. And they are 14, 15 years old at this point, at about 400,000 road miles each. You know, if you have a high mileage vehicle, you might be nervous. So we're trying to take care of that most immediately. And there would be a little bit more that we could do for some of the kind of easier transportation projects like sidewalk improvements or streetlights or things that are easier. As you guys know, living in West, one of the last projects we did with the 2008 Streets and Bridges bond was the Glen Creek intersection. And you can imagine how complicated that is with all, I mean, I can't actually begin to imagine because it involves a lot of engineering and property acquisition, but that we would be staging projects like that. The more complicated transportation projects would be staged for the latter phase of the bond. And so it all ends up magically working. But to your point, the specificity of the dollar amounts is really important for our ability to plan and manage the resource through that 10 years. And certainly for voters to feel confident in knowing what they're buying. I want to just add a little tiny bit more. There is a healthy tension in the group right now about whether to kind of talk about buckets. So they're thinking about taking that 150 million for transportation and assigning some portions of it for like sidewalk, missing sidewalks, or pavement rehab and rehabilitation. So that's like taking existing roadway and taking care of it so that it can last longer instead of completely redoing. So they're thinking about adding buckets of types of projects, and then should the bond pass, really doing a lot more community engagement about what those projects should be. I don't know if that helps. It's kind of it's an odd tension about being specific enough to make the bond add value to the individual resident who wants to support it, and yet retaining enough flexibility to be able to respond to something that turns into a crisis in the next 10 years. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. I certainly would like for everyone else to feel comfortable to jump in. The one thing that we are a West Salem Urban Renewal District. Mark May has done a really good job being patient with me because I can go down a rabbit hole better than anybody, asking all kinds of questions and these types of things. But Mark has done a really good job kind of reining me back in at times to say, well, how does this really affect our URA, which is our purpose here? Can you speak to that at all, and how many projects, if any, have been identified for our particular responsibility?
I can. And this is a little bit, I think, outside the urban renewal area, but it relates to West. One of the projects right now that the committee is wrestling with is how to fit Marine Drive into the bond. And just, if you may not be tracking this quite as much as some of us, but Marine Drive is at about 47 million in its current form. And so if you remember, about half of the bond, so 150 million, would be allocated for streets and transportation projects. And so the real challenge that this committee is having is how to get Marine Drive in and retain enough transportation related funding for projects to make the bond appealing across our community. So that currently is a fabulous debate. Steve Anderson from the West Salem Neighborhood Association has been coming to the bond and committee and been providing a lot of great testimony about where Marine Drive might start and end as a way to make it fit easier, so make it a little bit cheaper. So that's kind of the conversation right now, is how to ensure that can be in and still make investments everywhere. So on the transportation side, I would just say, if you have interest in transportation related projects, you might hang out on your computer at over YouTube on the 15th. They usually meet between 1 and 3. I don't know that we've set the time just yet. And the committee will be debating those projects, what's in, what's out. So if you want to watch the sausage being made, you're welcome to join us on YouTube to hear more about that. The parks projects are also in a similar state of flux. I know I can share what I have in my notes from this last meeting, but it's still moving. So I don't know if that would help or hurt. Are there any other questions while I look through the parks projects?
I would just like to say, Courtney, I would really appreciate being on any kind of email distribution list of how to participate in some of these conversations. Specifically, Marine Drive, I think, is a big deal, and I'm not sure that Steve's vision and my personal vision would match. So it'd be good to have some robust dialogue there, I think.
Thank you. On the parks side of things, this is, again, I think, that tension about specific and buckets. So they're looking at some court replacement, play court replacement. There's a possibility of some dog park fencing. One of those might be Orchard Heights. Again, please don't become attached to these project ideas. There's some conversation about playground rehabilitation. We're looking for projects that help us reduce the ongoing operating costs. I know this is silly, but our capital side of our budget, well, you guys know all about this because you live in capital. Our capital side of our budget is separate from our operating side, and the operating is very strained right now. And so we're trying to be mindful about how to reduce overall operating costs. So replacing parks equipment is a great way to make things safer and cheaper in the maintenance department, and those are harder to fund. Brush College is in there for playground replacement, and I don't see another West project. So are there any other questions while I'm thinking on the fly? Anything?
I have a question.
Please.
What is the time deadline that you have to get everything presented and ready? to put to vote?
Ooh, that's such a great question, and also the subject of much discussion. For those of you that have been around municipal bonding before, you might be nervous. It's pretty tight. We absolutely have to have a package for the council to refer to the ballot by August. This is kind of silly too, but it's another detail. When the council takes that action, staff stand down, and we look more to a political action committee to step up and do the remaining campaigning. Staff can answer objective questions, but we can't be perceived as electioneering for the projects, if that makes sense. So our role changes significantly when council takes that action, no later than August 8th, or we run afoul of other rules that I don't want to explain. So the sooner we can have some precision around what the bond is, the better off we'll be in terms of being able to explain what's in it, if that helps. So it does feel late to some. I know our fire chief spent about 2 years of work before the 2006 bond talking about it. So we feel a little under the gun, to be sure, but it's a council and a community process. And so we're really happy to see so much engagement and help building the package. Other questions? Come on, anything's legit. This is a big bond.
Do you know what the city's current annual budget is? Just curious.
Well, I should, because it's challenging for me to explain because they put the capital budget in it too. But I remember we were like $500 million all in, maybe last year or the year before when I wrote the budget message.
Okay.
You could be more precise. I have just the thing right here. Do you have other questions, Mark?
I was curious, so if just assuming that's correct, $500 million a year, and this amounts to about 30 million a year, right, over 10 years. I'm just trying to get perspective on, the magnitude of this spend to a citizen. $300 million obviously sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But there's just perspective. That's all I was asking. Thank you.
Oh, anytime. One of the things that the bond committee has been kicking around is this idea of why can't we use SDCs, system development charges, or why can't we use other fund sources? And what I would tell you is that these projects are being put forward in the bond because there really are no other funding sources. Part of why you see the IT investment in there is because we can't do it within our operating. And these are eligible projects because they're larger infrastructure projects. The Civic Center, by the way, is getting a historic designation. It is a wonderful example of brutalist architecture. And so we're with it for the duration. And there are quite a few. It's the only 1972 era building that hasn't received the same level of seismic improvements. We've done that work just recently, and thank you for your help on the $18.6 million library bond. We did that for the library. In 2006, we were able to do that for the fire stations. And then, police has left the building, and they are in a seismically sound building now too. So this is the last remaining building of that era that hasn't had the investment. So Mark, to your question, we are approaching 700 million in operating and capital investments on an annual basis in this year's budget. The construction budget fluctuates, and it's usually about a third to a half of whatever our total budget value is. So construction is complicated and confusing, but most of the things that are in our capital improvement program, which is on our website, it's a 5-year investment strategy, and you can look at it by neighborhood and you can sort and have a lot of fun with it. Most of those projects tend to be utility projects, which are funded out of rates, and that's on intentional schedule to make sure we don't get behind, so we can always provide water and wastewater and stormwater to residents and businesses. So other kinds of capital money, we tend to be pretty scrappy about getting federal investments, federal grants and other sources. Those federal grants also present some challenges in terms of cost and availability. So for example, McGilchrist, which is another urban renewal area, we've been trying to get federal funding for that project, and we get bits and pieces and segments, but we haven't been able to complete that project since we opened the urban renewal area in 2005 or 6. So it takes a long time to make these kinds of investments. And then I would also say we have a sidewalk program that is just inching along every year and not really making the kind of measurable improvements that I think people expect of us. So the idea of taking 300 million in a 10-year plan really pushes us further than we could get any given year on our own. And the SDC investments, just to close that loop that I opened, I think it's about $2.5 to $3 million a year for system development charges for transportation related projects. And that just isn't quite at the pace that we could achieve if we were able to do this kind of investment together. Anything else? I'm glad you asked that question because I literally just have my notes on the budget right here.
Courtney, do you by chance know? Oh, I'm sorry, Jason, you were going to ask a question. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's okay. Courtney, I know there's a lot of discussion in the steering committee going on right now, and that discussion will continue. How is that being made or printed in a digestible format for the average citizen who will need to weigh in on this or have the opportunity to weigh in on this? And now is the time to talk to your ward councilor, especially for those people who live in West Salem. Virginia Stapleton, I know, or Councilor Stapleton is on the steering committee. But
this is Councilor Mickey Varney, just for the record.
Oh, is it Mickey? Oh, okay. It's okay, great. But how, like, are we seeing actual SWOT analysis? I know there's a lot of discussion, but then interpreting that discussion, so when Marine Drive comes up, are we actually, is the community actually seeing a full pros and cons list? Economic impact of what if we did that and stuff like that. So it's not really opinionated, it's just really fact-based. I haven't seen that yet. So I'm kind of curious to know how do we get that kind of information extracted for the community?
That's such a great question. And we're kind of in that sticky phase. I think I think Marine Drive was just put above the line March 18th or maybe March 28th. And so we haven't built all of that out, to be sure. And that's where I think, to Tom's point, we're kind of feeling it a little bit. We do have a page on the community improvement bond on our website. And so we have what we knew at the time, which reflects kind of the larger segments of that pie, but it's missing library branches because that was, just added last week. And we don't yet have council approval so we're in that really sticky phase where we need to be out talking about what it represents, but we don't know yet exactly what we're talking about. I know personally about Marine Drive. We're looking at that at really, in addition to the transportation benefits, opening up a lot of land for development in affordable housing, we hope in particular, but there's a lot of opportunity there for development along Marine Drive, some segments of Marine Drive. So there are certainly auxiliary benefits of that project. And we just need to know that it's in and have council approval of the bond measure so that we can get moving. But if you want it, and it's not digestible. But if you wanted to see all of the bond materials so far that the committee's been looking through, including all the testimony, the poll, all of that, it's also on our website at each of their meeting agendas. So if you want to look at any of that. But for right now, the broader messaging about the merits of each section of the bond is a little static and dated from January when we first started. Sorry, Jason.
Kind of dovetailing into Jason's question regarding Marine Drive pros and cons specifically, is there also something similar to that for this overall bond? You mentioned that things are dropping off. My personal finances, just a quick comment, when you pay something off, I don't necessarily want to fill it right back up to where I was. And so I'd be curious to know if there is any data that shows, okay, these bonds are falling off, and yes, we have the ability to bond up to this 300 million, but if we don't, your taxes would be X or whatever the case may be. I think that would be an interesting thing to see.
We could do that, certainly. We have a whole bunch of ideas to build information around. If you're interested, I can show you how things drop off in the coming years. I have a slide for that. If with the approval of the group, I can share that with you if you guys want to see that. I see some nodding.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
And does it by chance equate to dollars as far as, well, I'll just shut up and look at it.
It's kind of complicated, which is part of the reason why it's not getting a lot of traction. But you can see the blue, it represents prior debt for bonds that preceded the fire stations and trucks. So you see that was 2006, we were approved for fire stations and we started making investments slowly. And you can see that occur starting in 2008, and then it moves through, and it was, anyway, it's almost, I can't see if it's about to be retired. Yeah, retired is in this fiscal year, last fiscal year. And then you can see kind of that complicated dance I was mentioning earlier of issuing debt for streets and bridges in 3 separate tranches. And we did that again intentionally to keep tax rates about the same over time. So we are at, I think the goal, Jeff, is 1.20, I think 1.20, 1.22. And I've learned something even more complicated about bonding is that we don't get to set the rate. We get to tell the county what we think the rate should be, and they tell us if that's okay. So it's a little bit more complicated. But you can see adding in the library upgrades and the Salem Police Station. We were able to refinance some of the streets and bridges debt and shorten it and use some savings to continue investments in streets and bridges. So that gives you a sense of the levy over time, and we hope to just keep it constant. The question about if the bond doesn't pass, what happens to the rate is a good one, and I will get an answer for that.
Yeah, I just remember when the library and the police bond happened, it seemed like I heard from a lot of people in town, gosh, my taxes went up 14%, or my real property taxes went up X amount, which is surprising because most people don't actually look at their real property tax statement annually, but they feel it when their house payment goes up through their escrow accounts. But anyway, I just was wondering because I know that at one time it went up so much. So you're trying, is the city trying to bond to the high point then? In other words, it went up a couple of years ago that I'm going to say somewhere between 12 and 16%, depending on how it affected your home value, as an example, your home property taxes. And that's where you guys are trying to stay up to that. Is that correct?
We're just trying to stay at current tax rate that the city controls. So there's other noise in the tax bill, like the school district passed a $600 million bond. Those things also influence the real tax burden that homeowners face. So there are other things occurring inside the tax statement, but the city is, our portion would stay at its current tax rate.
Gotcha. And I think that's a good distinction because the difference between the city and the school bond, one of the largest, if not the largest in the state, regardless of the school bond, if I remember correctly, regardless of school districts, that was a major influencer of the year that I'm referring to, not necessarily the police bond or the library bond. So thank you for correcting that. Any other comments or questions for Courtney?
I saw the chat was working. So since I think Mark brought up the question about the budget, there's a great budget and brief breakdown for the current budget. I mean, they're going through the process now. So this will be updated for the next fiscal year. This is how Courtney does things. She really takes a lot of big information and makes it easily accessible to the community. So I'm not sure if you did this personally or not, Courtney, but it's a good reference.
Thank you. I don't know that I did last year. I can't recall. Last year never happened. But our budget itself, the book is, for those of us that remember phone books, it is like that. And I had the privilege of looking over a couple draft sections yesterday, and that's just lots of red lines. So hopefully it's better this year.
Yeah, Tori, thank you for providing that. I already went and downloaded it so I can look at it a little bit. Hopefully everyone else did too. Courtney, Mark, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you did a really good job presenting this. Thank you. This is an incredibly complicated set of issues. I look at this as sort of depreciation always happens, and we have to keep reinvesting and improving what we already have. Just because something like the fire trucks, just because you buy them once doesn't mean you don't have to buy them again. Eventually they wear out, as do our roads and other things. And so it's really just more about priorities at that point. Yeah, thank you for the overview.
Thank you for following along. And I would also, Tori, I'll send you whenever I see the notice for next Friday's meeting. I'll send it along because I think that's where we will start to see those parks investments and the streets investments really start to take shape. And Jeff, with your interest in Marine Drive, I think that would be interesting for you to hear how they're talking about it.
Tori, if I might, what's the budget on the 2nd Street project again?
So Courtney, and I guess the rest of the group too, we have spoken about this in the past as far as 2nd Street, Marine Drive, and an undercrossing of Wallace Road. So I think, Mark, that's what you're referring to. It was really all these pieces of a puzzle to help the connectivity of the West Salem urban renewal area, as well as broader transportation support for the regional area. So if Marine Drive were to extend into the urban renewal district and we're to have the undercrossing piece, the undercrossing alone, I want to say it was like, I don't know, the whole project, 2nd Street under Wallace to Marine Drive was about $35 million. And that was 2015, 16 when we did the feasibility study. So, you add about 6% inflation on that. So you do 10% just to make it easy. Roughly 45 million potentially. So it's expensive with the undercrossing piece.
And then what about just the current work that's happening? Just the, Wallace West. Currently.
Yeah, so 2nd Street, we're looking at, so it's about $1 million to design and then another $8 million to construct, $9 million total, roughly.
Okay. So the reason I asked is we're talking about, $150 million for streets over 10 years. And we've got, a really small project within West Salem. I mean, I think it's fairly small. That's 10 million, and which is separately funded. And I understand all that, but just for scale, $15 million a year for 10 years, just on this budget, just for streets. So it's 1.5 second streets sort of scale on an annual
That's a good way
basis.
to put
Again,
it.
the dollars are big, but when you actually look at what it does,
Yeah.
we're not talking about rebuilding the city with this bond.
Thank you for that. And if I could just add, one of the things that I've really enjoyed out of all of this process, even though it has been a little bit of a scramble, is I've really appreciated, so on the legislative side, I have the opportunity to pitch different projects. And we, as I mentioned, McGill-Christ has been our perennial favorite. And it doesn't come without challenges, but a project of this size, as we're discussing for Second Street, up at about 35-ish, 40, whatever, that might be a really good candidate. So one of the things I've appreciated about this effort, there are, to your point, Mark, more things below the line, right, than that are making it up into the bond. And yet everything below the line represents a really important priority for our community. And now that we know what that is, because we've had great input from around Salem, now that we know what that is, and we have a pretty decent cost estimate to the extent that you can right now with the market and everything, we're poised to really look at all the other funding sources for some of these larger projects. So that's exciting to me, because now I can turn my attention, once the bond is set, I can turn my attention to those other funding sources like the regional transportation funding that we tend to be fairly successful in securing for the bigger things that don't fit. One of the questions that I usually get is about all of this emphasis on infrastructure funding at the federal level, and how come we're talking about this kind of a bond at this juncture when there's all this other money coming. And so far, Marine Drive, I think, would be an exception, but so far, most of these projects are really community scale. And it's that bundling that makes them work well for this bond, but wouldn't be successful in a competitive federal market. And so that's what I find really exciting, is that while we are identifying way more than we can afford in this bond measure, we are putting some great pins in priorities that we can shift, if they don't fit, shift to other funding sources that have their own challenges and sometimes quite far away from identifying to delivering, but it does give us a good path forward. So even if things don't make it, I'm really excited about the work that we've been able to do together so far. And that, Tori, Second Street is not on my list, so you should tell me in more detail about it so I can put it on the list, not for bond funding, but for all the other opportunities that we have. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark.
Okay.
I don't want to overstay, Jeff. Are you?
No, not at all. I just want to make sure there's an opportunity, and it would appear that there aren't any other questions or comments. So with that, just to echo Mark's comments, Courtney, thank you for being here and presenting to the group. I think you did a really good job, and we look forward to seeing the evolution of the document and how this process continues to move forward.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And again, Tori, I'll get you the link next time I see it, and you can get it out to everyone. Thank you for your time, everyone. It was a very good conversation. I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you, Courtney.
Take care. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving on down the list, unless there's any additional follow-up comments from the group, we can just move on down the agenda. Looks like we're going to move on down the agenda. So we're kind of at the end of the agenda for Mark Smith and Tom. You guys are new here. Typically what we try and do at the end is, towards the end, is kind of talk about what's going on within the URA. And then we finish with just any kind of topics that you might want to see moving forward. So with that said, Jason, do you mind jumping in with Edgewater Partnership, excuse me? Giving an update on a couple things I think you give updates on.
Yeah, Edgewater Partners general meeting meets last Thursday, fourth Thursday of the month. They have a planning meeting on the second Thursday of the month. Anybody in the community is welcome to participate in those. They recently decided to sponsor several businesses in the Edgewater community for the upcoming Thursday Farmers Market. So they're participating that way. They continue to have an article in the West Side newspaper that goes out monthly. If you have something you want to write about, you can participate and offer to write one of those. I think they've got it planned out for the next 6 months. So if you're wanting to get kind of on there or write about something unique about West Salem as it pertains to that group, you could volunteer. I think that that's really all we've got for that particular group. Do you want me to go on with West Salem Neighborhood Association?
Please.
Yeah, West Salem Neighborhood Association, again, a great place to get involved in discussion on land use and development in the West Salem area. A lot of great educational opportunities there, and a lot of great minds who are paying attention to what's going on in West Salem. And a great forum for discussion about different developments, whether it's some coming in on 2nd Street off of Edgewater, or Dokes Ferry, or out at the kind of the edge of West Salem at the moment. So Steve Anderson is our land use chair, tries to keep everybody informed. Because Councillor Varney was recently appointed to City Council, she will no longer be in the Parks and Rec chair position, so that position is open. West Salem Neighborhood Association is also still looking for a secretary to fill that executive seat. That's all I have to say there.
Thank you, Jason. Jason, how long are those meetings running? Are they still a 3-hour marathon?
No, we try and keep them down to an hour, hour and a half. I mean, I think as involved as people are, we all appreciate the gift of time. So
agreed.
Anytime we can wrap up a meeting quickly, that's great. Obviously, there's some subject matters that require more time, and there tends to be more involvement from the community members who live in West Salem for some subject matters, like the unhoused population. You know, anytime we see the city saying, hey, we want to put up an organized camp here, everybody's involved. Everybody's a member of the West Salem Neighborhood Association immediately. So, you know, it's interesting, but in general, people seem to be less concerned about development issues, land use issues, which they should be. And, you know, that's just my personal opinion, because these things are affecting traffic, you know, future use of the bridge, all those fun things. So anyhow, any other questions?
Hey, Jason, can you tell us who's the current chair for the WSNA?
Michael Freitas. And what I'd say is, you know, he really stepped up to the plate, continues to lead the group really well. He's open to a lot of discussion. He's easy to access, which is also really great. And, you know, so if you have a subject matter that you're interested in seeing on the agenda, happy to get you in touch with him.
Sure, thank you. Now, is he going to be the president for a while, or is he an interim, or is he just a regular chairman?
He's elected by the membership body. He's currently serving his second term.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Jason, are those still online through Facebook, or are you guys back in person?
Yeah, we are not back in person as of quite yet. We have found, for reasons of accessibility, convenience, that online meetings we're going to continue with those for the moment. Also, venue for hosting, cost of that is also challenging. So that's always a discussion point amongst the membership and the executive committee.
How do I get in that link or on that link? Is that a Zoom link is what it is, or?
Right, the Zoom link is always consistent. It is currently on our Facebook page. We are in the process of building a website and moving, the goal is to move away from Facebook, mostly because you don't own Facebook. Facebook owns you. And so the business community and nonprofit community and not-for-profit community organizations continue to find themselves at the mercy of their page being shut down for no reason with Facebook or the metaverse or whatever you want to call it, whatever that company is called now. But again, while we have a great followership on Facebook, and that's also been a big discussion, it's not a reliable and viable platform for the future because your organization does not control or own it.
Yeah, I guess I would echo the same sentiment. I think it's good to have your own page.
Yeah.
Jason, I wouldn't mind if they're on Zoom like that to participate. Probably, I have not participated for a number of years for various reasons, but being that it's on Zoom, perhaps I should, and if it's only an hour and a half, perhaps I can jump back into that.
Right, and it's also, the agenda is posted a week in advance on the City of Salem website. If you go to neighborhoods and find your neighborhood, West Salem, the agenda, the minutes, we've got a lot of great guest speakers. We always generally have a representative from the police department, Councilor Stapleton, and Councilor Varney are very, very active participants. They're there to listen, respond, present to any concerns, challenges, or opportunities that the group has. We brought in many other speakers. Tori's participated with a handful of times is in regards to the 2nd Street development and other concerns. So yeah, it's just, we've got a good group and it's a great place to find out what's going on.
Perfect, thank you. I'm not on Facebook, so it's not something easily accessible, but going through the city is good, so thank you. Jeremy, are you part of the West Salem Business Association?
I'm a member, yeah.
Would you mind just jumping in and giving us any kind of update from your perspective on the neighborhood or on WSBA?
Yeah. So I don't have privy information for what's going to happen at the next meeting, but at the previous meeting, we had city council candidates, Chris Cummings and Mickey Varney. They were there for their first debate. So we had a lot of guests. That room over at Roth's was packed. We had to get an extra table out. It was really great to see them all together and talking about the issues. It's pretty much my report for now. It was a lot of fun.
Good, thank you. Let's see. Looks like we're kind of at the end of that portion, unless there's anything that would be added by anybody else just regarding the URA in general in West Salem. And if not, echoing Jason's sentiment of the gift of time, we'll probably get out of here a little early, with the exception of just asking if there's any topics. I know that we have some topics and Tori has topics kind of laid out. Tori, maybe you want to just kind of give us an overview of that in the future?
Yeah, sure. So as Jeff mentioned, it's open if you guys have suggestions or topics you want to visit in the coming months. So what we had scheduled for May tentatively is an update from someone at Urban Development to myself that works for Riverfront Downtown or the North Gateway or renewal areas, like update on projects, grants, and things. It's just a good check-in. I do the same thing occasionally, go over to their groups to inform them on things that are happening in West Salem. So if that's what you'd like to hear from, I'm happy to extend that invitation and have that on the agenda. For me.
By chance, are there any, it looks like Mark May dropped off here. Any other topics that you guys would like to see next month? And I'll just encourage you, it's hard on the spot to be, hey, come up with a topic. So certainly if there's something that comes up, feel free to email Tori or myself, and we'll get something going on that topic if something strikes you moving forward after the meeting. So don't feel pressure to do anything with it.
Really quickly, Jeff, if I could add, with the agenda, the last page, I included the calendar topics. So just if you want to look a few months out, if you have something that aligns with a particular topic, again, these aren't set, just kind of an idea at the beginning of the calendar year, just so we have we can anticipate topics over the course of the year. So if you have any suggestions, as Jeff mentioned, please feel free to reach out and let us know.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Tori. And again, thank you everyone for jumping on these calls earlier in the morning. And Mark and Tom, thank you for joining the group. We look forward to seeing you monthly at this point, and perhaps we'll run into you in some other meetings as well. Any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me or Tori, and we'll see you guys next month. All right, everyone, have a great day.